The air in Kale's penthouse office was a weapon, cold, sterile, and filtered to a scentless neutrality that screamed of control. It was the antithesis of everything Elian was, a smothering blanket over the wild, tangled forest of his true nature. He kept his head bowed, his posture a carefully constructed sculpture of subservience. Fragile, unassuming, human. The lie was a second skin, worn so long it had fused with his bones. From his position by the vast, floor-to-ceiling window, he watched the city sprawl below, a glittering circuit board of distant, meaningless lives. His life had only one meaning now, vengeance, and its architect sat just feet away. Kale, the alpha of alphas, a predator in a bespoke suit, his power a low thrum that vibrated through the marble floor. When he moved, the stale air eddied around him, carrying the faint, primal scent of pine and winter frost that no filtration system could fully erase. It was the scent of dominance, of territory, and it scraped against Elian's instincts like a cage door grinding shut. Kale wasn't looking at him. His attention was on Reese, his second in command, a hulking brute whose loyalty was as absolute as his cruelty. They spoke in low tones, but their conversation was punctuated by a language Elian was not supposed to understand. An ancient, guttural tongue that flowed like stones tumbling in a riverbed. Gata Hans, Kale murmured, a flick of his eyes toward Elian so brief it was almost subliminal. Watch him. Aer-Itva. Rank, there is something wrong. Reese grunted his assent. A cold, sharp thrill, equal parts terror and triumph, shot through Elian. He kept his gaze fixed on the cityscape, his expression placid. He had been here 3 days, a new acquisition, a personal secretary with a forged history of impeccable service to powerful men. They thought his silence was fear. They thought his stillness was meekness. They had no idea it was the coiled patience of a viper. Every secret whispered in this dead language was a nail he would hammer into Kale's coffin. This one, wrong, was the first. It was a beautiful start. Kale dismissed Reese with a curt nod. The silence that descended was heavier than the conversation had been. Elian could feel the alpha's gaze on his back, analytical and intense. He waited, his heart a slow, steady drum against his ribs. This was the most dangerous part of the hunt, the quiet moments, the spaces between the violence, where a single wrong move could unravel everything. The scent of pine and frost grew stronger, closer. Kale was approaching. Elian braced himself, locking the wild thing inside him into its deepest, darkest cell. Elian. The name from Kale's lips was a low rumble. Elian turned slowly, his manufactured vulnerability clinging to him like a shroud. Yes, Alpha. He hated the title, the way it bent his tongue, but it was a vital piece of the masquerade. Kale's eyes, the color of storm clouds, roamed over him, searching for the wrongness he'd scented. Elian's own scent was a void, meticulously scrubbed away by suppressants and tinctures that cost a fortune and burned his skin. He was a blank slate, a ghost, and it unnerved the Alpha's primal senses. My office. Now, it wasn't a request. Elian followed him, his steps silent on the plush carpet. Kale's office was another cage, this one of glass, steel, and shadow. One wall was a window overlooking the city's heart. The others were lined with dark, imposing bookshelves. Kale didn't sit. He prowled the space, circling behind Elian until his back was to the door. Trapped. The air thickened, charged with Kale's potent pheromones. It was a test, a display of dominance meant to make a lesser wolf, or a human, tremble. Elian fought the instinct to bare his teeth, to meet power with power. Instead, he forced a tremor into his hands. Kale stopped behind him, so close Elian could feel the heat radiating from his body. He leaned in, his voice a whisper of sound by Elian's ear, not in the common tongue, but in the ancient one, the language of wolves, the language of Elian's murdered family. SVO little, SVO gull, Kale breathed, the words a ghost against Elian's skin. So small, so silent. He inhaled deeply, a frustrated sound in his throat. Engen Lykt. An eg fin ig samt. Eg fin ig titra no scent. But I feel you anyway. I feel you tremble. Elian's trembling was real now, but not from fear. It was rage. A white-hot, seismic fury that threatened to shatter his control. He understood every syllable, every possessive, curious inflection. Kale was playing with him, a cat with a mouse, utterly unaware the mouse had teeth of its own. Ert Rigta. Kale continued, his fingers brushing the nape of Elian's neck, just below his hairline. The touch was electric, a brand of ice and fire. Og Egmon Lesa Ig, you are a puzzle, and I will solve you. Elian squeezed his eyes shut. He couldn't break. Not yet. The plan required patience. It required Kale to trust him, to pull him closer, to whisper more secrets. He let out a small, sharp breath, a perfect imitation of fear, and Kale finally pulled back. The oppressive weight of his presence lessened, but the echo of his words, of his touch, remained seared into Elian's soul. I will solve you. You will try, Elian thought, the promise a silent, vicious oath. And when you think you have, I will break you. The mask nearly shattered a week later. It happened in the polished granite corridor leading to the executive garage. Elian was carrying a stack of encrypted data slates for Kale when one of the Alpha's security enforcers, a hulking brute named Merrick, deliberately blocked his path. Watch it, pretty boy, Merrick sneered, his own scent a foul mix of stale sweat and aggression. He shoved Elian's shoulder, not hard enough to do damage, but hard enough to be an insult. A dominance play. The data slates tumbled from Elian's grasp, clattering across the floor. For a single, incandescent second, the meek secretary vanished. Elian's head snapped up, and the look in his eyes was not one of fear or surprise. It was ancient and feral, a flash of silver-white fury that promised death. His body went preternaturally still, coiled and ready. He didn't flinch. He didn't even breathe. The shift was so abrupt, so alien, that Merrick actually took a half-step back, his sneer faltering into confusion. Then, the moment passed. Elian blinked, the silver light extinguishing as if it had never been there. He dropped his gaze, his shoulders slumping, the mask of the victim falling perfectly back into place. But it was too late. Kale had seen it. He materialized from the elevator alcove, a silent wraith of tailored charcoal wool. His presence slammed into the hallway like a drop in barometric pressure. The air grew cold. Merrick. Kale's voice was deceptively soft. Deadly. Did I give you permission to touch my staff? Merrick paled. Alpha, I was just. You will address him as Sir. Kale cut in, his eyes never leaving the enforcer's face. And you will gather what you made him drop. On your knees. The command was absolute. Humiliation washed over Marek's face, but he obeyed instantly, dropping to his knees to collect the scattered slates. Kale stepped past him and stopped in front of Elian, his gaze sweeping over him, searching. He reached out, his thumb gently brushing a spot on Elian's cheek where Marek's shadow had fallen. Are you harmed? No. Alpha, Elian whispered, his heart hammering for an entirely different reason now. Kale's touch was a paradox, a threat and a comfort all at once. Kale's eyes narrowed, lingering on Elian's for a moment too long. He saw the lie, the control, the sliver of the beast Elian had failed to conceal. Merrick rose, holding out the slates. Kale didn't look at him. Get out of my sight. Merrick fled. Kale took the slates from Elian, his fingers brushing against Elian's. The contact sent a jolt of pure, instinctual awareness through both of them. Later that night, hidden in the shadows of the server room, Elian overheard Kale speaking to Reese again, his voice a low growl in the ancient tongue. Hen Hristeki. Eki Iran, he is not afraid. Not really. A long pause. Avar Itva I Augum Hans, Ulfa Silver. There was something in his eyes, wolf silver. Another pause, this one filled with a dangerous curiosity. Hen Ifrar Hand Jamer. Altaf, from now on, he stays with me. Always. The next morning, Elian was no longer a secretary. He was Kale's personal aide, a glorified shadow, chained to the Alpha's side by an invisible leash of suspicion and intrigue. The cage had just grown smaller. The proximity was a constant, agonizing torture. He spent his days in the silent austerity of Kale's office, fetching documents, fielding calls, and breathing in the oppressive scent of pine and frost that now clung to his own clothes. He was a ghost in Kale's life, observing everything. The late-night calls, the encrypted messages, the network of power and fear that Kale commanded. Every piece of data was a stone for the foundation of his revenge. But the proximity was a two-edged sword. He also saw the man beneath the Alpha. He saw the flicker of exhaustion in Kale's eyes after a 16-hour day. He saw the way Kale's jaw tightened when reports came in of rival packs encroaching on the poorer districts, the ones the city guard ignored. Kale, for his part, seemed to forget Elian was even there, a silent fixture in the room. He began to think aloud, murmuring to himself in the old tongue, the language he believed no one else understood. They were fragments of thought, pieces of the puzzle that was Kale. Havers Vegna Drieger han Mige ser, he'd mutter, staring out at the rain-streaked window. Why does he pull at me? Another time, after a tense negotiation, he ran a hand through his dark hair, his shoulders slumping. Segen Hans, Huin Havarari in Oscar. This silence of his, it is louder than any scream. Elian stood by the door, his face a neutral mask, his soul a battlefield. The cold certainty of his hate was being eroded by a confusing, treacherous warmth. This man was the scion of the pack that had butchered his family, left him an orphan hiding in the ruins. He was the enemy. Yet, the instinctual pull, the unwanted whisper of his own buried nature, responded to the raw honesty in Kale's private confessions. The Alpha was drawn to him, and worse, some broken part of Elian was drawn to the lonely predator in the glass cage. The alarms blared without warning, a piercing shriek that shattered the office's cathedral-like silence. Red lights strobed across the walls, painting the room in rhythmic waves of blood. Lockdown. Kale snapped, already moving. His calm was terrifying, a deep stillness at the heart of the chaos. Rival move. The Volkovs. Before Elian could process the words, Kale was there, grabbing his arm. The grip was steel. With me. Now. He didn't wait for an answer, dragging Elian behind his desk, into the reinforced corner of the room farthest from the windows. The distant sound of automatic gunfire echoed from the lower floors. Kale pushed Elian down, crouching in front of him, his body a solid wall of muscle and intent. He was a shield. Stay down. Don't move, he commanded, his eyes scanning the doorway, his hand resting on the small of Elian's back. The touch was grounding, possessive, protective. Gunfire erupted closer now, in the corridor outside. The expensive glass of the office door spiderwebbed, then exploded inward. Two figures in black tactical gear stormed in, rifles raised. Kale moved with a speed that was barely human. He was a blur of gray and black, disarming the first attacker with brutal efficiency, a sickening crack of bone echoing in the room. He used the man's body as a shield against the second, closing the distance in 2 long strides. The fight was short, primal, and utterly one-sided. When it was over, 2 bodies lay on the floor, and Kale stood breathing heavily, untouched but for a dark smear of blood on his cheek that wasn't his. His eyes, now glowing with a faint silver light, found Elian's. The raw, untamed power of the Alpha was on full display, a force of nature barely contained by a human shell. He strode back to Elian, dropping to one knee. "Are you hurt?" he asked again. The same question as before, but this time his voice was a low growl, thick with adrenaline and something else. Concern. Elian shook his head, unable to speak. He had seen Kale as a tyrant, a target. He had not been prepared for Kale the Protector. The image clashed violently with the monster he had constructed in his mind. Kale's hand came up, cupping his jaw, his thumb stroking his cheek. His gaze was intense, searching. In the old tongue, his voice was a raw, rumbling whisper, meant only for himself. E.g. Mindy Brennaheim in Tile Halda or Origum, I would burn the world to keep you safe. The words struck Elian with the force of a physical blow. They were a confession, beautiful and terrible, and they cracked the foundation of his vengeance clean in two. In the chaotic aftermath, Kale was a whirlwind of command. His pack's enforcers swept through the building, securing the floors, while Kale directed the cleanup and intelligence gathering from his now-wrecked office. Elian, forgotten in the storm, moved through the space on silent feet, his mind reeling. I would burn the world to keep you safe. The words echoed, a dangerous siren song. He needed to remember. He needed the rage. He found it in Kale's private server room, a place he was not supposed to be. While the security systems were being rebooted, he slipped in, a wraith in the blinking darkness. His fingers flew across the holographic interface, searching for the one word he'd been hunting for 3 years. Silverwood. A file appeared, encrypted, but Elian's skills were not forged in corporate offices. They were honed in the shadows, taught by the last remnants of the resistance. The encryption melted away, and there it was, a kill order, dated 10 years prior. A full-pack cleansing of the Silverwood Wolves. The reason given, treason. And at the bottom, the authorizing signature, digitized and absolute, Kalen Volkov. Not Kale, his father. But beneath it was a second seal. The seal of the current Alpha, affirming the historical record. Kale's seal. He knew. He had signed off on the history, burying the truth of the massacre under his own authority. The cold, pure fury returned, a welcome relief from the confusing warmth. He was a monster. They were all monsters. He downloaded the file to a data chip, his movements swift and sure. As the chip slid into his pocket, the lights flickered on. Kale stood in the doorway, his suit jacket gone, his white shirt stained with sweat and blood. His expression was unreadable. I didn't give you access to this room, his voice was quiet, but the threat was a physical weight in the air. Elian's blood ran cold. He had been caught. He stood, his face a mask of pale terror he didn't have to feign. Kale walked toward him slowly, his eyes fixed on Elian's. He didn't look at the screen. He didn't have to. He could smell the ozone of a freshly accessed server, the faint scent of Elian's fear. He stopped a foot away. "What were you looking for?" he asked. Then, switching to the ancient language, his voice dropped to a near-inaudible murmur, laced with a new, dark suspicion. "Va ertu litli skuggy? Va folder. What are you, little shadow? What did you find?" Kale took the data chip from Elian's unresisting fingers. He didn't look at it. Instead, he watched Elian's face, his gaze intense, searching for the truth he knew was hiding behind those wide, haunted eyes. But he didn't punish him. He didn't call his guards. He simply pocketed the chip and gestured to the door. "Go to my quarters. Do not leave until I come for you." The order was flat, absolute. Elian obeyed, his mind a maelstrom of failure and fear. He didn't see Kale again for 2 days. He was a prisoner in the Alpha's lavish apartment, a cage of silk and chrome. Food appeared outside his door, but the silence was absolute. On the second night, he heard shouting from the office 2 floors below. The soundproofing was nearly perfect, but Kale's rage was a force that could not be entirely contained. Elian crept to the service conduit, pressing his ear against the cold metal. The words were muffled, distorted, but they were in the old tongue. And they were furious. It was Kale and Reese. Lies for 10 years. Kale's voice was a raw snarl. "My father's signature, but the command codes are forged. They matched the Volkov frequency. It was a sanctioned cleansing. Alpha." Reese's voice was placating. "The council approved. The council approved a lie." Kale roared. The Silverwood Pack was loyal. They were betrayed. My father was used as a pawn to eliminate a rival, and he let it stand to cover his own weakness. He let me believe the lie. Elian froze, his hand pressed against the conduit. A lie. Forged. His entire world, the singular purpose that had driven him for a decade, tilted on its axis. Kale wasn't the monster who upheld the order. He was the son who had just discovered his father's sin. "The boy," Reese said, his voice lower. "The secretary. He led you to this. He is not what he seems." Kale's voice was soft now, filled with a dawning, terrible understanding. His scent is a lie. His fear is a lie. Silverwood, that's what he was searching for. Gods, Reese, what if he's one of them? What if one survived? The silence that followed was more damning than any accusation. Elian pulled back from the conduit, his breath catching in his throat. Kale knew. He didn't know everything, but he knew enough. And the true enemy wasn't Kale. It was the Volkovs, the ones who had framed Kale's father, the ones who had truly given the order. And Elian's own allies, the remnants of his resistance cell, didn't know. Their plan was already in motion. A trap set for the wrong man. The trap was sprung at midnight. Elian's allies, the last of the Silverwood resistance, moved with the lethal grace of ghosts. They bypassed Kale's outer security, their methods honed by years of hiding and guerrilla warfare. Their target was Kale, isolated in his penthouse. Their intelligence said he would be alone. Their intelligence was wrong. Elian was with him. Kale had come for him an hour earlier, his face grim, the data chip in his hand. "We need to talk," was all he'd said. Now they were standing in the center of the living area when the windows on the terrace imploded. 3 figures, clad in black, armed with silver-laced blades, poured into the room. "Kale," the leader snarled. "Your father's debt comes due." Kale's only reaction was to shove Elian behind him, a reflexive, protective gesture. He faced the attackers, his hands raised in a placating gesture that fooled no one. "This is a mistake. Your fight is with the Volkovs, not with me." "Lies," another attacker spat, lunging forward. Kale met the attack, his movements fluid and deadly. But it was 3 against 1, and they were prepared. A blade slipped past his guard, slicing a deep gash in his side. He grunted, stumbling back, the silver in the blade already working on him, sapping his strength. He was weakening, his movements growing slower. He was going to die. He was going to die protecting the man who had come to kill him. The irony was a bitter pill in Elian's throat. Kale risked a glance over his shoulder, his eyes, now glowing a brilliant, desperate silver, locking with Elian's. He saw the terror in Elian's face, but he misinterpreted its source. He thought it was fear for his own life, not for Kale's. He shoved Elian toward the bedroom door, putting his bleeding body between Elian and the advancing wolves. He was forming a barrier, a final, futile act of protection. His breath came in ragged gasps. In the ancient, guttural language of the first wolf, he spoke, his voice cracking with pain and a desperate, raw emotion he could no longer hide. A command, a plea, a confession. "Heart him in, Flyja. Nu, my heart, flee. Now." The world stopped. The words, so tender and so hopeless, hung in the air between them, a bridge of impossible feeling built in the heart of a battle. He had called Elian his heart. He had whispered his deepest secret, believing it would be lost, unheard. Elian didn't flee. He didn't move. A profound stillness settled over him. The fear, the rage, the confusion, it all burned away, leaving behind a single, stark clarity. He stepped out from behind Kale. He placed himself between the Alpha's wounded body and the 3 shocked attackers. He raised his head, and for the first time in 10 years, he let the mask fall away completely. The meek, fragile human dissolved like smoke. The cowering Omega persona vanished. In their place stood something ancient and powerful, something the world thought was extinct. His eyes ignited, not with the pale silver of a common Alpha, but with the pure, blinding white light of the moon itself. A Luna wolf. He looked at his former allies, his kin, and in the same perfect, ancient tongue, his voice rang out, clear and absolute, a shocking countercommand that shattered the night. "Nei. No." He turned his head slightly, his blazing eyes meeting Kale's stunned, disbelieving gaze. He offered a single, possessive, earth-shattering promise. "E.g. Verndemit. I protect mine."